Greetings all, Dr. Garrett here along with Dr. Harbison, and we are here to discuss today the bench press. So this is going to be our shortened, abbreviated version of the movement, the setup, the execution, and the common faults, and more importantly, the purpose. So I'll briefly start off by sharing my purpose for the bench press. Ultimately and superficially, this is a great way to develop your chest muscles and look good at the beach and have some bragging rights in high school when you tell everyone how much you bench press. But the deep meaning for me and the true purpose for this is an opportunity, particularly in sport, to create space. This is a great horizontal press in the sagittal plane. And in doing so, this concentric phase where we're flexing at the shoulder, extending at the elbow, we're pressing exogenous weight away from us and creating space from us in the bar. And oftentimes in sports, you need to do that as well. So that's my primary purpose. Dr. H?
Yeah, I agree. I think if you look at any time you need some sort of upper body power in sport, almost always it's a pressing action. There's not a lot of, certainly rowing would be one example of the need for, shoulder extension or horizontal abduction. But most of the time it's either pressing or it's a strike, like hitting a baseball or throwing a baseball, any type of throwing, hitting, striking. You look at hockey or golf or baseball. These all involve kind of that horizontal adduction, bringing the humerus kind of across the midline. And so in that sense, the bench press does a great job of developing, that kind of motion in one way or another. Plus you get in the benefit of, because it's a compound movement, tricep or elbow extension, the triceps being active there. And like you said, creating space or, whether we're kind of pushing an opponent laterally in basketball or something, or pushing in football or any of those contact sports, there's application for all that. So upper body power, strength, this is for a good reason, the lift that so many people, do on Monday in the gym, because there's priority there. So Monday is International Bench Day, of course. Yep. But yeah, there's good reason for it. It's not just a bro exercise.
Yep. And we'll keep it there. So stick around for the longer version. And if you caught it, you'll want to stick around because you'll notice how I mentioned shoulder flexion and Dr. H mentioned horizontal adduction. And there's some reasons and some things that we're going to wrestle through with that there. So we encourage you guys to stick around and have us talk through the bench press. So
one of the things I think we want to hit in this, the kind of shortened version, is talking about technique errors. That's one of the things, we see quite a bit anytime we're watching, whether it's people in the gym or students doing exercise videos themselves. Technique is a big one in bench press. What are the most common errors that you see, Levi?
Some of those common errors, I think, are trying to replicate a power lifter. So we'll see some odd movement at the spine or some odd setup at the spine. And then oftentimes a lot of internal rotation at the shoulder. So those are kind of the two most egregious that I see.
Yeah, I think for me, I say there's two real common ones that I see with the general population would be kind of inconsistency with where the bar is hitting the chest, or kind of the bar path. A lot of times you'll see people, I'll try and give you kind of the superior view of people getting the bar too high on the chest and having too much shoulder abduction and kind of this impingement waiting to happen at the shoulder joint here, bringing the bar too high on the chest. The other one, a lot of times you'll see with people who are not adept at bench pressing or haven't spent much time doing it, is a lack of what I would call stacking of the elbow and wrist joints. So you'll see kind of a separation here, whether it's too much elbow flexion and the elbow is lateral to the wrist, and you're kind of doing more of a tricep extension this way, or like you said, too much internal rotation. It's a lot of times it's just a lack of having the elbow directly stacked underneath the wrist, which we want to see with any type of press, is having the wrist and elbow joint stacked vertically. Oftentimes you'll see errors at the wrist too, with the bar kind of too far out in the hand. So we get too much wrist extension rather than kind of that more powerful, more neutral position at the wrist. But the main, we always want to be careful with the shoulder joint anytime we're doing pressing movements. And so that's the main one I would be concerned with when teaching someone how to bench press, is looking at the mechanics at the shoulder. Are we getting impingement? Are we kind of more at that neutral, maybe 45-degree angle of abduction, that the shoulder's going to, be a little bit more safe in that position? And then looking at the elbow versus the shoulder and the relationship there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I may add one last thing, coordination is always going to be a limiting factor to technique. If people are just, novice or amateurs at this lift, there's going to be an element of neuromuscular coordination that needs to occur in order to maintain a solid movement or solid technique. But also, and this is no surprise, and this is often another common error, is misloading the bar. And we'll see that in any movement. And essentially, the load is going to dictate our technique a lot of times. And so people will put too much weight on, and that's when we start to get, one shoulder starts elevating before the other, or we see people like wiggling on the bench. And I think a lot of times it's not just due to coordination, which is can be an instance or a reason for that, but it's also improper loading as well.
Yeah, we'll talk more about stability and how to develop. I think a lot of that comes down to setup, and how to develop a solid setup and kind of foundation from which to press. We'll get into that in our lengthier video on technique.
And also in that lengthy video will be some examples of proper setup, proper execution, as well as some common faults. So stay tuned for that. We'll be back in a minute.